Hello everyone, my name is Chris Titley and welcome to the FinTech Australia podcast. The FinTech Australia podcast takes listeners on a deep dive across the fintech industry in Australia, focusing on the challenges, opportunities and big stories our community faces. Let's get to today's episode. Hi, it's Chris Titley here as part of the FinTech Australia podcast, and today we've got a very special episode. We're going through the entirety of what was CDR Month in June. We've got a number of guests, including Matt, who I'll get to in a second to say hello, but we've also got representatives from Intuit, Simeon Duncan, Rachel from the AIIA, Nick from FinTech Australia, and Darren Booth from RSM. But I'm going to say g'day to Matt Mytka, Regional Director of FData A and NZ, Australia and New Zealand. Matt, thank you and welcome.
Chris, pleasure, mate. G'day. Thanks for having me on.
Not a problem at all. Matthew, let's talk about CDR Month, the concept itself for people out there that didn't really know what it was and how it all came about. Can you give us a bit of insight?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess firstly, just want to thank the sponsors for getting behind this kind of campaign that we drove. We had Intuit, RSM Australia, InvestNet, Yodlee, Visa, National Australia Bank, Radium, and K&L Gates that really provided some financial backing, which is really important for these initiatives. Without their support, it wouldn't have been able to actually happen. So shout out to them. And CDR Month really started with a bit of a seed in my mind in November last year. I'd been working on a systems research and analysis project of the CDR ecosystem with the Systems Innovation Learning Lab for a few months back then. And one of the key insights that kind of came out of that was there was a need for a collective identity around CDR, and its emerging ecosystem. And so much of this emergent kind of ecosystem is still disparate. It's, kind of young, it's a bunch of seedlings in this garden. And there's no really unifying voice or kind of platform for that to really be communicated. So, the question in my mind was, how might we go about creating this kind of, this shared identity, and really bolstering a sense of community. And I did a survey of FData ANZ members at the time, and there was kind of some support for the concept. And I'd also just started some early discussions with FinTech Australia and Australian Information Industry Association on strategic partnerships, and kind of brought them into this discussion, kind of floated the concept and probably some of my very early crazy ideas around
love it.
What I envisioned it. Some of those didn't come to fruition. They were just way too wild and crazy. Probably a wild set of pumpkins in the garden that probably didn't need to.
Maybe they'll come to fruition in the following years potentially. But we'll get onto that.
Yeah, that's right. The seedlings may grow with the right nourishment. So we essentially nurtured this. Planted more seeds, and through months of dedicated efforts from the three partnering associations, we kind of spawned this thing, and we had this theme of exploring the limitless potential of CDR. It's such, there's the consumer data rights, this big ambitious reform and digital transformation. It has so much potential, and how do we go about exploring that? So we put together this concept for the month, and that was really captured, this exploring that limitless potential. We had the community really come together and reflect that theme really well. We had three main anchoring events across the month, with a welcome event at the start of the month with Frollo hosting that. That was in Sydney. We had a roundtable in Canberra where we brought a whole bunch of people from industry, civil society, kind of academia to Canberra to kind of talk through some of the challenges and opportunities of CDR, and then the CDR showcase, which was wrapping it up, and that really showcased the amazing things that are already happening with CDR. And one of the things that someone said to me yesterday from fintech that's involved in CDR was she was just really felt like the buzz and like momentum, and she said that it's been years since she's felt that there's that much interest and momentum around CDR. So, quite exciting. And along with this, we had satellite events, which were these events that were community hosted. We had organizations like InsurTech Australia, PropTech Association, and a host of other organizations from across the ecosystem run webinars and other events to kind of, talk through some of the challenges, the existing opportunities, the different needs, perspectives. So it was a really good learning platform throughout the month. 10 events across the whole month, combined audience of like 700-800 people. It's just really amazing. Showing of community support and collaboration.
No, congratulations on putting that little thought in your brain to what was a fantastic month. And later on in this episode, we're going to hear from the representatives about the various elements and the roundtables, etc. So really looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, it's I've got a belief that your vision for things should be nothing short of beautifully ambitious. And while that's not a great ideal, it doesn't always materialize in that way. Being beautifully ambitious is something that's extremely important, and we should aim for the moon always.
Thanks, Matt, and we'll retouch with you later on in the episode after all the guests share their thoughts for a bit of an outlook on what's happening in the future.
Thanks a lot, Chris.
And now we've got Simeon Duncan, the Senior Manager International Corporate Affairs at Intuit, joining us. And Intuit was one of the key sponsors of CDR Month. Simeon, thanks so much for joining us on the line.
Yeah, good to be with you, Chris.
Now, CDR Month, what a success it was, and obviously Intuit being a major sponsor. I'm curious to know, how that came about, how that discussion started, and your views of the whole month.
Yeah, well, look, it really stemmed from Intuit's dedication to empowering consumers and small businesses. Intuit has been a fintech pioneer for over 40 years now, and is really committed to empowering consumers and small businesses by, giving them better control and better use of their financial data to improve their financial lives. And look, the second thing with CDR Month is that it really aligned with its again, as I said, to enhance consumers' financial well-being through greater access and control of their data.
Fantastic. And then when it comes to sort of global adoption, Intuit being a global company, we've seen the likes of the UK adopt various different things, and the US, etc. Where do you think Australia's at, and through this whole month in terms of the progression that we're seeing as a nation?
Yeah, look, I think one of the key conversations that came out of this month is that Australia is really at a tipping point as far as the consumer data right goes, and certainly its adoption. We've seen a slowdown on the extension into other sectors of the economy, which I think is appropriate. Aussies like to be ambitious, and we probably started off with the most ambitious sector being banking. And so I think it's appropriate that there is a slowdown and really consolidating that and getting that right, given the sort of financial underpinnings of banking and finance to the whole economy. But when in that slowdown, we need to make sure that we don't lose momentum in creating the use cases both in retail consumers, but also not forgetting that small businesses are consumers of data. Both they create data and they need to consume their own financial data for their benefit.
And during the month, there was various events and networkings, etc. Can you talk me through about your involvement in those events or representatives of Intuit and what you got out of it and the learnings?
Yeah, look, we were really pleased to be involved in a number of the various panels, some of the showcase events that happened right around the country. One, it was just really encouraging to see the diversity and the fintech innovation that's going on right around Australia. Obviously, oftentimes there's a bit of a state of origin war between New South Wales and Victoria, but to see innovation from WA, Brisbane, and satellite events in those places was really encouraging. Obviously, Intuit's primary customer in Australia is is small businesses through our QuickBooks Online and MailChimp. And so we're involved in some of the panels that talked about, how accountants and bookkeepers will benefit from open banking. And, also some of the, again, given our global experience, some of the lessons learned, from open banking rollouts overseas.
And Simeon, we're seeing lots of different talk about industry trends at the moment. The most popular one at the moment is AI. It seems to be a hot thing. We probably talk about that all day when it comes to the future of AI and financial services. But are there any industry trends that you're picking up on in regards to where things might play out with CDR and sort of a little bit of a glimpse into what you think the future might look like?
Yeah, look, I think we're going to see a growth in data-driven decision-making. As we get more and more comfortable, both as citizens using wearables to tell us, when to exercise, when to drink water, when to be mindful, I think we'll see a rise in the data-driven decision-making, both in small business that is going to lead to greater business productivity, where businesses can take a real-time financial overview, a real-time view of their energy use and power consumption, things that are going to help streamline those administrative burdens, making it easier for them to manage their operations. I think also, and it's something that I'm quite excited about, is the sort of increasing personalization, enhancement of personalization as we share our data and as a small business makes use of its data, it can offer more personalized services, really driving home that customer satisfaction and loyalty. So I think there's exciting times for both sort of retail consumers and small business consumers.
I definitely think so, and particularly in this macro environment, there's a fair bit of uncertainty around there, and so people are looking for tools and use cases to not only sort of enhance their business, as you mentioned, for decision making to invest, but also to survive at the moment and to allow where potentially cut costs or at least kind of manage and be more in control. So we could talk about this for hours, but I do thank you very much for sponsoring the CDR Month in association with FinTech Australia, being on this podcast. We really look forward to future CDR events, and FinTech Australia have already said that they'll continue this as an annual event. So looking forward to catching up in real life in person again and discussing all things CDR. I'm sure next year we'll bring a whole lot of different topics and sort of initiatives as well.
Indeed. Pleasure chatting today, Chris.
And today we've got Rachel Bales, who is Head of Policy at the AIIA, who were one of the initiative partners of the CDR Month and host of the Anchor event in Canberra on the 20th of June. Rachel, thanks so much for joining me on this very special podcast talking about CDR Month, hosted by FinTech Australia as well.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be with you.
Now, Rachel, let's talk about your organisation and your involvement in CDR Month and how it all came together.
Absolutely. So I think it was back in December 2022. We had an approach from the wonderful Mathew Mytka at FData ANZ. He knew that we'd been a thought leader on the topic of CDR over a couple of years, and that we're a digital-based industry association. And together with FinTech Australia, he approached the AIIA about being one of the 3 initiative partners behind, originally we were going to call it CDR Awareness Month, to be held in mid-2023. So in some ways it feels like a long time ago, in other ways it feels like yesterday.
Yep.
But they were the seeds of something quite special that the AIIA was very proud to support, because at the heart of what we're about in representing our digital and ICT members is forging that path towards a truly digital economy. And we see the CDR reform as having an important part to play in that story. Fantastic.
And as discussed before, you hosted one of the Anchor events in Canberra on the 20th of June, and you chaired that event. Lots of industry insights, lots of things going on. Probably a little bit hard to remember because it is a couple of weeks ago, but did you want to sort of give us a little bit of a wrap up at the start of that on what your thoughts were and how it all played out?
Yeah, absolutely. So right from the start, when we designed the Open Data Roundtable, there were sort of 2 things at the top of our minds. So the first was that we wanted this to be a 3-way conversation between industry, academia, and government. And we were very proud to have representatives of all 3 of those pillars present, because part of the roundtable, it's having, these financial technology organizations in the room, those who are kind of at the coalface of this very new embryonic layer of our economy that a few years ago didn't exist. So we needed those that were kind of getting their hands dirty there in the room to talk about learned insights from that lived experience. So we needed industry there, and obviously the AIIA is an industry association. So that's our focus. But of course, it was very important to have representatives of the regulator, the ACCC, and then of course the Treasury there, because they're the ones kind of setting the foundations, marking out the guardrails, introducing the legislation, undertaking statutory reviews. So we wanted to make sure that there was a really viable feedback loop between those at the coalface and then those who can sort of shift those foundations in a way that's sensitive to industry needs and consumer needs. So that was the government side. And then the third pillar of that, which sometimes is omitted, is having academics in the room. So it was fantastic to have Dr. Anton Didenko from UNSW fly down for the event. He's got some fascinating insights into the role that consumer trust plays in the CDR framework, but also an understanding of what's going on around the world and what modern best practice is around data portability. And I think when you get those three players in a room together, really exciting things happen, and it sets up a really ideal forum for us to learn together, which was the second thing about the roundtable and the way we designed it. We wanted it to be about open learning and open conversations. We think that when you open the window, let the light in, let the oxygen in, and when you know that people are watching, people are listening, sometimes it changes the tenor of those conversations. There might be someone tuning in who's just a regular citizen who wants to use and engage more with the consumer data, right? And they're the people we should be serving. So we don't think these should be siloed behind closed doors conversations. We think we need to practice what I preach. CDR is partly about openness. And so we wanted to have an open roundtable. So immediately we knew we wanted it to be a hybrid event. There's something about in-person interaction. There's something you can't replace there.
Yep.
But also you could see when we're sitting in the room there, a big green light up on the roof, which means, we're live. Like there's people all around Australia tuning in right now. And I think it's important kind of looking up and seeing those faces and knowing, there were 90 people sitting at home listening in, and there was an opportunity for them to ask questions, and we could hear their voice loud and clear beaming in. So that was really special, I think, to practice what I preach and what we preach and make it a genuinely open data roundtable, which is, I think, what we achieved.
For sure. And I think having those various stakeholders as well as members of the general public, because it is such it's sort of a buzzword that happened from my point of view, over in the UK, and you saw things and you've seen iterations happen here in Australia. Was there any chat around, how far progressed or lack of progression we are compared to our international counterparties?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the interesting components of the roundtable, we had an agenda item called the global story so far. So we started with the story so far domestically, and someone from Treasury spoke to, what's going on with statutory reviews and action initiation being brought in. But then we had the global story so far, and we had representatives from Singapore and New Zealand beam in, which was absolutely fascinating, looking at some of the use cases that have come about in Singapore in relation to health and hospitals, the way that Singapore sees data portability and data interoperability as being really important for a 21st century economy, for digital transformation as a whole. And in terms of how far we've come, it was really exciting because someone from the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment over in New Zealand spoke, and it was like the stars aligned because it was the very next day after the roundtable that in the New Zealand Parliament they introduced their CDR legislation.
Wow.
So it was great timing, and often we talk a lot in industry about we need to keep up momentum, and there's this sort of energy let's keep this moving, and maybe sometimes some frustration, but what he was saying was that, wow, you guys have achieved so much. And so I think hearing that from our, trans-Tasman cousins was really heartening to see wow, well, look at what we have built here. And this thing really is humming in some areas. And although, there is a sense that we need to keep momentum going. We need industry to be in a position to take ownership of this and drive it forward and follow the use cases for the consumer benefit and business benefit. I think it was great to be able to sit back and take stock and go, wow, look at what we have achieved. And then now there can be these trans-Tasman learnings where New Zealand can introduce this and say, okay, well, these are some of the steps that were taken in Australia. This is what's worked there. And part of that learning, would have come about because of taking part in that roundtable. So that was great.
No, it's fascinating. And from a collaborative point of view, that roundtable sounds like it certainly was, again, sort of like a clarification of where things are going, and as well as, the progress that's been made. But on that progress, in terms of the industry use and CDR, was there sort of some use cases or industries that you mentioned industry to step up, etc. But from different verticals, I'd imagine we jumped on a podcast recently talking about CDR and energy, CDR and financial services, so lots of different things. Is there any sort of talk about which particular industries may have the use case at the moment, which is probably most beneficial for their participants?
Yeah, I think there was a sense that the move to energy has been quite timely. There's a lot of excitement around that. It seems to make a lot of intuitive sense. So that's a very ripe area. But changing tack a little bit at the CDR showcase that we had last week. I know it's not the topic of this podcast, but there were some fascinating applications in the financial services industry within, say, mortgage broking.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, and using CDR and the power of artificial intelligence, indeed, to help mortgage brokers analyze, clients that might be at risk of moving to another lender, those sorts of things.
Retain customer retention tools. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, a lot of excitement around energy. There's quite a thriving market that's grown for energy CDR, but also we've seen banking is quite solidly established, and it was great to have representatives of major banks in the room. And something that the banks spoke to quite a lot was that banks see digital identity as something that's been quite pivotal. They've taken steps, the banks themselves, things like Connect ID, and there was agreement around the table that digital identity is going to be quite key in advancing CDR and looking at the ways that digital identity, which at the moment is a discrete standalone reform, could plug into CDR and really help make it work on a larger scale. Because obviously, trusted interactions, being able to verify that a consumer is who they say they are, that's something that's relevant for CDR, and that's also something that digital identity is trying to do. So I think there was agreement that rather than working in silos or standalone reforms for digital economy, we need a sort of centralized coordinating point where we say, okay, well, what could digital identity do for the CDR? See how these things interoperate, plug into one another, so that we gain more momentum and have digital economy across the board, not just as standalone pillars.
Rachel, fascinating topics, and well done, and congratulations on that roundtable event, and also being one of the initiative partners of the CDR Month. Obviously lots of events going on, lots of talk about the industry, and sounds like lots of networking and lots of collaboration and thought leadership from various stakeholders to all come together. Congratulations, and we look forward to more CDR events in the future and the following years from what you guys have created.
Yeah, so proud to be involved. Thanks so much, Chris.
And our next guest on this very special CDR Month podcast is Nick Kavass, Head of Policy at FinTech Australia. Nick, thanks so much for being part of this very special episode that goes through the happenings of what was CDR Month in June of 2023.
Thanks, Chris. A long time listener, huge fan of the show.
Thank you. Now, Nick, let's talk about FinTech Australia's role and your role in particular, and how FinTech Australia incorporated into CDR Month and the various initiatives that they brought to the table.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I might briefly sort of touch on my role and the work I do at FinTech Australia, then can kind of segue into
perfect.
What happened during CDR Month. In my role, I do sort of the policy advocacy, government relations type work, all the fun stuff. So in essence, we sort of try to give the fintech community in Australia a shared voice. So for example, when the government's looking at making changes to policy, there's new legislation, regulations, changes to guidelines. We'll respond to those consultation processes, make submissions on behalf of members, conduct face-to-face roundtables, and appear at parliamentary hearings. So FinTech's pretty broad, as we know from this show and the huge variety of guests and episodes that we have, which means we're very active as well. So I think we had around 27 different policy submissions last financial year. So quick plug to the policy work that we do.
Well done, mate.
Any listeners, and particular members, to get involved. And any input to these processes is valuable. You don't have to sit there for hours and read through all the paperwork. Any thoughts or feedback is always really, really helpful. And we have different thematic working groups across all sorts of things like payments and lending, crypto and blockchain, and consumer data right as well. So let's chat a bit more about Consumer Data Right Month, and in particular the CDR Showcase event we had right at the end of June.
Yep, perfect.
So this was the main event, I suppose, the CDR Month. It was a closing half-day conference to wrap it all up. So as other guests probably would have said, there were many events throughout the month, a few face-to-face, a few online events. But this was the big sort of culmination of everything that happened through the month. So we had a keynote address from Professor Ross Buckley, a few different panel discussions, a fireside chat involving Open Banking UK. And then what was a real highlight for me, and something a little bit different to the usual conference fare, we had a founder consumer data right use case pitch session.
Interesting. What was that? So what was that? Talk us through that particular session and how that sort of was unpacked in terms of practicality.
Yeah, so I think with consumer data right, something we often hear is, where are the use cases? It's been sort of a long build phase and a lot of talk about compliance and building the poles and wires to make it all work. But there are founders and particular fintechs out there who are building some really cool things, some use cases to make use of the data that flows through using the consumer data right. And we really wanted to put a spotlight on some of these. So we ended up having 6 different founders get up on stage during the event and give a pitch night style presentation. So it wasn't a normal sort of pitch night that I've seen you at a few times, Chris.
It was a pitch day.
Everyone was a winner on that day. But got everyone up there, and they sort of pretty punchy, short sessions talking about how they're bringing the consumer data right to life. So I'll give a couple of examples. We had Adam and Steph from Sherlock.
And just recently raised some money too.
They're going gangbusters, doing really well. But they have a solution primarily for mortgage brokers where it uses CDR data to automate home loan repricing. So it gets consumers a better deal on their mortgage. It makes it a lot easier for brokers to sort of comply with their best interest duty and even get their clients a better home loan, which is,
I think that's very, very apt at the moment with what's going on with the RBA interest rate.
And then we had another really cool one was Greener. We had Neil McVeigh up there. This is a solution or an app where it uses CDR transaction data to track carbon footprints and then make it easier to shop sustainably. So just by you going about your daily life, Chris, you shop wherever you shop, and then based on that data, it then gives you a real summary of your carbon footprint, and then makes it easy. It's sort of, and then implements sort of a cashback style mechanism where rather than getting cash back in your pocket, you can use that to offset as well. Yeah,
nice. No, I've interviewed Tom before from Greener. It seems like a very interesting concept, and on the funding side, I think some of the I think NAB is there as well in terms of the funding, and for a consumer, it's certainly opening one's eyes as to the way that they shop and how they can make subtle changes.
Yeah, so I think this session really brought to life what beyond sort of the technical sort of subject matter we get into when we talk about the consumer data right, and there's always new legislation or new rules or new data standards. The founders that are there really bringing this to market today, putting this in consumers' hands. So it was really, really cool, really exciting to see, and when we sort of put out, EOIs for this and we're asking around for people to be involved, it was overwhelming response. So yeah, hopefully it's a session we can run again in the future, and get more of these sorts of stories spotlighted and up on stage.
Nick, I'm interested to know in regards to, and it was just talked about during the other sessions of this podcast, in regards to the industry use cases, because it seems to me that it's sort of CDR started with broad-based financial services, but it has morphed into other industries, as you mentioned there, things like mortgage broking, and energy's popped up a number of times. I'm sort of curious as to how you think industries will pop up and use cases pop up, because you did say before there might be a lack of use cases, but yeah, from this particular day, did it sort of open your eyes a little bit?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there's sort of the logical ones. I think the lending space has always been a pretty logical first step. You look to sort of areas where there's already high usage of data, maybe obtained through other means at the moment. But as things shift over and consumer data rights fully adopted, I think the government recently signalled that they're going to start to looking at options for phasing out screen scraping, which I think historically has been sort of the alternate way to get data, particularly in the lending space. As that happens, I think there's just going to be number of consents, number of businesses, number of consumers integrated with the CDR and consenting to data being shared is just going to start to skyrocket. So I think we're at a really crucial point for the consumer data right. Government, in the May budget announced $88 million of funding, so another 2 years of funding to really improve functionality, deal with some of the issues as well, of course, but keep the momentum going. So we're at a really crucial time where open banking is now, more or less fully rolled out. Energy's just about there as well. We've got action initiation legislation in Parliament as well, which that'll flip CDR on its head again, where instead of just being able to access information, actions will be able to initiate it as well. So you can make a payment, you can switch to a different product, and that can all be a bit more streamlined and seamless for consumers as well.
Nick, one final question in regards to the sort of the uptake and use cases. It's been obviously driven by entrepreneurship, as you talked about some of those pitches, but there's also other large companies that might introduce CDR to the consumer. The common consumer in the street probably doesn't even know what it is and how it all works. Where do you think it will lead or come from in regards to adoption, awareness, and use cases, and obviously value for the consumer?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think even once there's much greater adoption, it doesn't necessarily have to be something the consumer on the street fully understands where it's coming from.
Yep.
It'll just be sort of integrated into these platforms. We even had Dan Jeweski from WeMoney up there as one of the pitches of the personal financial management app, and just through that app, you immediately engaging with consumer data, right? Getting a full picture of your finances and manage that better. And most consumers might not even know that that's being powered by the consumer data, right? So
true. It's a good point.
Yeah, it's definitely a driver of innovation. I think these new products will emerge, and that's the thing. Even when people up there presenting, part of their presentation was how consumer data right was integrated, but they could have had the same presentation and you wouldn't have even known.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's a good point.
It's just about data, right? Data's powerful. Data's going to be, during Professor Ross Buckley, who gave the keynote at the start, I think he described data as the new oil. It's going to be powering the economy of the 21st century. So
awesome.
And that's a good way to look at the CDR. It's been sort of, I think we're 3 years in, but this is really a piece of digital infrastructure for the next century. And that's definitely a quote I've nicked from someone else. I can't remember who I attributed it to, but I think it's a really nice way to describe it. And that it's still very early days, and there's a lot of room to grow.
Yeah, I think on that note, we'll leave it there. Nick, thanks for coming on and giving us a recap of that particular showcase, the discussions that happened, certainly the pitches and the use cases, which I think is very, a lot of people are very, I suppose, aware of what is going on, but also people like practicality of use cases and seeing actual, CDR in action and how it can benefit consumers and companies and be much more efficient. Looking forward to catching up at future FinTech Australia events. Nick, we've got Intersect coming up. Shall I get ready for the FinTech Festival, mate? How's it all going?
Yeah, things are starting to come together really well, and definitely consumer data rights going to be a big theme again at Intersect at the end of August. So yeah, definitely CDR month itself is coming to a close, but the conversations definitely don't end here.
Yeah, for
we'll
sure.
be keeping it going, and I think that was a really good outcome from the month. That was sort of that more collaboration and really broad representation, not just sort of the usual suspects of consumer data right land, but much broader than that. We had a lot of government attendees, a lot of different agencies, a lot of the banks as well, academia as well. So it was really nice to see a lot of different people coming together, and even just consumer data right now being able to sustain a pretty big event. I think we had 250 people in the room watching these sessions. So that was awesome to see too. I think in the past it's been a bit of a part of other events like Intersect, but to stand on its own 2 feet now, I think is a really awesome sign for the maturity of the consumer data right ecosystem.
Yep, absolutely, mate. Brilliant. Look forward to catching up soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Talking about CDR month, we've got Darren Booth, who's a partner at RSM. Darren, thanks so much for being part of this. And I'd like to firstly start to talk about your particular role at your company and how you got involved in CDR month.
Yeah, definitely. So I head up the cybersecurity and privacy practice at RSM in Melbourne. And we started getting involved with CDR right at the very start, where we worked with Frollo, which was the very first non-bank ADR. So we've been working in the CDR landscape for probably about now three and a half years. And through that, we're now up to about sort of 20 different organizations with their accreditation or helping them through a representative agent type arrangement, really just sort of helping organizations practically implement and get access to the data. So less in the theory, more in the getting the hands dirty and getting in there to work out how do you actually use CDR and comply with the requirements.
And then when it came to this sort of flagship event of the month, obviously there was a number of key initiative players involved and a number of key sponsors. I'd like to sort of gauge how that came about and why you did it, and certainly throughout the whole month how you interacted with the various events.
Yeah, look, we're a big fan of CDR. There's no doubt about it. And anything that can promote it as an offering and trying to get more organizations involved, we're there all the way. We really do see it as a real something that is fundamental to the digital economy.
Yep.
So RSM really supports small to medium enterprises, and that's where we sort of see really can get some real benefits through CDR. And the CDR month, we saw that as a great opportunity to support organizations just understanding more about it and understanding practically how they get involved, and therefore we're very keen to support it from the very start, given it's the inaugural CDR month. We held a CDR event at the very start of the month. What wasn't officially part of CDR month, but it did fit in very nicely with some of the other that were going on. And then we attended a number of the webinars and other activities, and finally went to the CDR showcase. And we're pleased to see 5 of our clients actually involved in showcasing their use cases as part of that.
Yeah, I was just chatting to Nick actually just before from FinTech Australia around that particular showcase event where he was talking about some of the pitches, and we were discussing the sort of the variation of industries and the use cases, of which Nick was saying that a lot of people ask about the use cases of CDR, but I'm keen to know your thoughts about what you're seeing in terms of different segments and sort of where entrepreneurs can think about a different industry and say, well, actually we could use this to really create value.
Look, and it's exactly right. Seeing things like Greener, which is sort of a combination between energy tech and
FinTech. Yeah, yep.
And some of the other organizations getting involved, it's fantastic. And I think one of the real benefits will start coming when open energies combined with open banking to really sort of create some of those use cases, which probably are difficult to do today, screen scraping. I think the thing for us though is really all around, trying to identify what uses can be done today under the rules and which ones are just too hard. And this is probably where I go off a little bit off script in that, we love CDR, but it is really hard for organizations to become accredited and get a use case that actually gets an ROI for them.
Yes.
So we work through in relation to, right, what do you want to do? What are you currently doing? Can you now do this in CDR world? If you can you do it in a manner that actually gets some sort of return? And therefore, is it worth actually making that transition?
Yes, yep. And I think, moving forward, if we, doing this event, and I know FinTech Australia looking to do this as an annual event next year, you'll have more use cases, probably, more people sort of stepping up and saying, can we get accredited and potentially, finding that ROI. I'm keen to know whether you're, the thoughts on the whole month itself, and then obviously going again for next year.
Yeah, and I think the month is around raising awareness, and for me that was a key success factor, and have 200 odd people at the showcase at the end. I think that's fundamentally tech.
Yes.
There's no doubt about it. And then it's really all around forward to say, well, now know about it. How do you actually now practically implement it? And how do you take a use case that you think is going to actually be useful and worthwhile? How do you now actually work out if that is actually the case? So, take a roundup yes, which seems like it's perfect for CDR, and perfect for getting something through, but is really difficult under the current rules to find use case because of data derived from CDR data. So it's really trying to work through with the founders to say, what do you do? Can you do it? And is it worthwhile doing? And I think the more organizations get involved, the more people understand what the rules are, the more advocacy is done around what's practical and what's impractical. That then can really try to drive this forward, both from a used perspective, but also even sort of just making the government aware of some of the things that can be done and some of the things that can't be done.
Perfect, Darren. Thank you so much for giving your sort of insights into the RCM's involvement in terms of the sponsorship and certainly where you play, and some of the thoughts given around the use cases, the potential legislation, and as you mentioned, like where companies can find an ROI. And looking forward to catching up in person at future FinTech Australia events.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Rick.
And there we go. We've got lots of stories from the CDR month. And to wrap up, we've got Mathew Mytka again, the Regional Director of F-Data. We chatted to you at the start of the episode, Mathew, about the seedlings that you planted into what was a successful CDR month. I'm just curious to know now what's next and how you've gone about providing, getting feedback from the month and the next iteration of CDR month.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. The wonderful set of seedlings that was spawned during June and the previous months leading up to it. And I think the consumer data right is just it's really in the early stages of emergence as an ecosystem. It's only been 3 years since CDR kind of went live, and it's just such a large scale reform that involves digital transformation across so many sectors. It's extremely complex. The next 12 months, we're going to see, the government's got its priorities set for CDR with the recent budget. That's a doubling down on what we've got already to improve open banking, open energy. We've got non-bank lending moving forward.
Mortgage broking, which was talked about in one of the episodes, one of the guests early on as well.
Yeah, exactly, and that's exciting. So there's priorities to continue, ensuring the foundations are there, and I think as with one of the sub themes that we had with CDR Month, which was, that industry moving from lobbying to kind of leading CDR. We're going to see more coordinated collaboration taking place in industry, and I'm really trying to push for that. FData is kind of being reimagined in the region here in Australia and New Zealand to be the Open Data Implementation Alliance. And the aim of that is really to augment what the government is already kind of doing, but also give government and industry and other stakeholders a kind of platform to realize the potential of CDR. CDR Month was a proof of concept essentially for the inaugural year. And we've had lots of fantastic feedback throughout the month. And it took a little bit of time. It was, the first thing, it was a little bit abstract at the start, but once we got started, people understood what it was about. There was a lot of support for it. So, we've got conversations going on about, what it might look like next year. There's kind of surveys and stuff going out to capture more input, and more kind of conversations with the stakeholders that are involved. Ideally next year, we've got more support from the government behind this. They've been talking. We want industry to, really do all this stuff, and I think there's, a bit of a disappointment that they weren't as involved as we really wanted them to be throughout June. They were involved in lots of different ways. We had representation across some of the events, but we want to see essentially more support from them. I mean, we had the New South Wales Investment New South Wales get behind the CDR Showcase event. I think, government support, they're the behemoth that has all these resources and a network to really bring these things to life. So next year, more, excitement, momentum. We've got Intersect coming up as well with FinTech Australia, the kind of festival. And, that's really important to continue on some of these conversations that we had throughout CDR Month. So next year, I think, it continuing as a campaign, we really want to see it be this, keystone month throughout the year that we come together across industry and as communities to really help realize the potential of this. It matters to current and future generations. It's, my view is it's just so important to come together and figure this stuff out. And, we've got to come together as, being a sum that's greater than its parts.
Exactly, and I think that was the theme throughout the guests about getting stakeholder involvement of all different industries, and as you mentioned, government and the roundtable in Canberra that included academic as well. So academics, etc. So I think getting everyone together to share ideas and collaborate, following on to Intersect as you mentioned, and then going into next year. Look forward to the annual CDR Month in 2024. Mathew, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, and thank you for planting the seed initially to what was an amazing month, and looking forward to continuing on the good work that you've created from year number one.
Thanks, Chris. Absolute pleasure. And, I'll continue on being the guerrilla gardener of these ecosystems moving forward.
Thanks for listening to the FinTech Australia podcast. I'm your host, Chris Titley. The FinTech Australia podcast is a collaboration between FinTech Australia and Sub 11. For more information about membership options, news and the events coming up, jump on to the FinTech Australia website. Have a great day. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.